This is the FLF podcast hosted by J3VC. I'm here with my fantastic co-host Jason. Our special guest today, Michael, is a local agent in the area, absolute expert killer. So if anyone's looking for anyone to sell a property in the area, give Michael a ring. But thanks for coming today.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're here to talk about some real estate stuff. So can you give us an overall brief of what's happening in the market at the moment in regards to time on market that you're seeing?
Yeah, look at Newcastle, Macquarie area. It's gone out a little bit from where it was a couple of years ago, but it's probably normalised from that COVID boom where things were sort of walking out the door after the first inspection. It's probably pushed out a little bit further than that 30-day benchmark that I think most people use as a pretty good measuring stick. So it's pushed out a little bit further, and I think there's, like any market, there's differences in the market. Things that are done, completed, renovated are going pretty quick and still getting really good prices. Things that maybe need a little bit more work or overpriced, obviously, is the other one, are sticking around on the market a little bit longer.
Are they still selling, you think? Or is it just as soon as the vendor realises what the price should be, that's when they sell? There's like that line? Yeah,
and that sometimes takes a little bit longer with different vendors than others. That I think every property sells is just trying to determine what the market sees as the realistic price for it. So it's obviously having an agent who's prepared to give you that feedback around what a property is realistically worth. I think most vendors, if they're selling their home, they only get one chance to do it. Capital gains tax free, so you're going to maximise every single dollar. So I think we always have a strategy, and you never blame any vendor for trying to shoot for the stars, but it's being prepared to listen to that feedback from the market to ensure that you're actually going to get the sale and not sit on there as a bit of a distressed asset.
Yeah, I see. And you mentioned buyers just then. What do you think is an ideal for the most amount of buyers? Let's say if we wanted to create something, we wanted to create some stock for developers.
Yep.
What would be the ideal stock in this particular area?
Look, I think families is your biggest market. That it's probably the middle of the market, and that's where you're trying to aim to sort of please as many people as possible. So if you're looking more at those homes that it's 4 bedrooms is probably what people are expecting. There's not a lot of families that have got sort of 3 or 4 plus kids, but the average family is probably coming back to 2.5 kids these days. But they want that study space, they want the home office, they want the home gym, they want the space for guests to come along. So I think that sort of 4 bedrooms is probably the most popular if you're looking at homes. Mm-hmm. I think if you're getting into the apartment and townhouse space, we're seeing less and less of 1-bedroom apartments. It's really hard with construction costs to make that stack up. 2-bedroom apartments, but again, that 3-bedroom apartment means that you can have a couple of people in there in that extra space, whether it's a home office, a study, a gym, or just a spare bedroom that people are wanting these days. There's more space that people are aiming for. The downsizers is the other end of the market. That's a little bit more of a specific one. I think a lot of developments that we're seeing, whether it is aimed at that family market or not, if you're getting that extra room in there that might be a multimedia room, on the ground floor might be a 5th bedroom that can be converted, but I think for those downsizers, it's a bit of future-proofing and future planning and making sure they've got a space downstairs with a bathroom near it or attached to it, so that as they age, instead of having to move out of their home that they've established a family in and lots of memories and emotional ties to, that they're able to stay in there and they're shifting downstairs into that space.
Interesting. Are you seeing a lot of apartments stack up to the point where the developers are making money? Because I can see at the moment in this particular area, in the higher end, they sort of seem to work, but the middle and lower, I've knocked it on the head for a bunch of townhouse sites myself, because they just don't really. Yep. There isn't the demand for it for what it costs to build.
Yeah, agreed. I think the middle market's really hard with townhouses or apartments that where it costs maybe $500 a box to build an apartment, and a townhouse is probably somewhere fairly similar. So it's that magic mix of getting your site acquisition at the right level, but also then having your end values at the right point. If it's a townhouse, if it's costing you $500 to build, you need to get a pretty decent deal on the land, and you need to be selling it for $850 plus. So that really knocks out a lot of suburbs. You sort of go back to a bit more of your blue chip, and Newcastle and Macquarie, we've got really fortunate that we've got beautiful coastline, but we've also got an incredible lake. And I think the closer you get to either of those 2 points, the higher your price point goes. So your blue chip suburbs still stack up, but it's harder when you sort of get to that middle of the market and that mid-range suburbs to make things stack up, because you probably need to be selling a townhouse for 850 plus to really be making money on it. And it's probably the same for apartments. So again, it's trying to find things that are maybe closer to the water. We've had some clients with really some great success and really incredible numbers recently, but there've been ones that are close to the water, close to shopping centres or village centres for, again, those downsizers who might want to move out of those homes. Getting them in somewhere where it's close to the water, it's always an attraction, but then maybe close to those shops so that they've got the convenience of being able to walk down to the coffee shop, being able to walk to the chemist, the doctor, whatever else it might be, and it's all within easy reach for them. So I think that's where we're finding things stack up. Outside of that, it's really hard. That there's lots of development sites out there, but there's not a lot of profitable development sites out there given the cost to build at the moment.
I find that every time I look on the market, look on the internet, if I find something that says development site in the title, or it says it anywhere in the actual text, what I do, and it's almost spot on, I'll do a rough VSO on what the development's going to make, and then I'll add that to what the land's worth, and like, sure as hell, that's the price.
Yep.
It's the actual land value plus the entirety of the profit from the development.
Yep.
And that's normally the asking price.
Oh, and I think on the other side of it, when we talk to landowners, that they've got these, as soon as you say, oh, we've got a big block of land and developers are going to have a look at it, they add, that's the owner adding that premium on there, because I think developers are making all this money. It's a big misconception in the market that developers can make a lot of money, and there's a lot of them drive around in very, very fancy cars. But for everyone driving around in a really fancy car, there's one that's not had a great experience and not made money and delivered something to the market but not really made money on it, or lost money on it, or is sitting on a site 5 years later that's not going to be able to deliver to the market. So I think it's a misconception that developers make a lot of money, but they bear all the risk, that they're the sort of end point, that there's lots of them sitting there with sites 5 years later that they can't develop, that they've paid that premium for, and they're just sitting there on their hands because they can't make it work. So I think you're right, and when we talk to landowners, it's trying to find that balance of going, just because it's a big block doesn't mean it's a developable block, or it might be developable, but it doesn't mean it's going to be profitable. And especially if you start to add that premium, that people start to whack on there if they think they've got a development site.
Interesting. Have you got much experience with those sorts of sites where someone buys something and then ends up building it but then gets stuck with it?
Oh, look, not a lot of our clients. I think we've been fortunate, whether it's through some of our advice or feedback. I think for most developers, when you're looking at things, you need to have a couple of different exit strategies from something, and hopefully you don't get to the back end and left with something that you've been able to figure out other ways around it. So we've got a site at the moment that is approved for apartments, and the owners are maybe looking at selling it, and one of the options is that it probably works really well for a childcare centre. So they may not go ahead with the apartments, but they may be able to make a profitable exit from the site, selling it to a childcare developer or provider. So it's trying to find those different exit points, and the base fact is a lot of the time banks or lenders, whether it's non-bank or private lenders as well, won't lend on things that don't really stack up, and it's not to say things can't go wrong in that process, or feasibilities shift or prices shift. We're pretty good in Australia that when we talk about market crashes, it's a couple of % down versus other markets like the US, where they lose 20 or 30% of value of a property overnight sometimes when their market swings. So we're in a pretty stable housing market most of the time. There might be some little ups and downs, but overall pretty stable.
I've seen it in Australia, and the ones where pretty much the only places I see go down is in the very high end.
Yep.
And places where the price of their houses are completely linked to work in the area.
Definitely.
Like Perth or mining towns. Yep. Like where 5 years ago you could buy a house for 300,000, and then today you can't get a house for under 1.2 million, and the rental yields are like 9%.
Yep.
All this sort of stuff's going insane, and people start pumping money into the economy, and then the mine loses their lease, or they find a little flower that someone says is endangered, so they shut the whole mine down, and then all of a sudden, boom, overnight.
Shift in commodity prices may no longer make it sort of feasible to pull whatever they are out of the ground. So Yeah, I think there's lots of horror stories about that, of people rushing to the next hotspot, and it's based around one employer. I think in Lake Macquarie and Newcastle, we're really, really fortunate. We've got a really wide and deep employment base. That we've got lots of healthcare, we've got lots of education, we've got mining up the valley, we've got tourism, we've got retail, we've got multiple pillars to our economy. So it I guess, immunises us from some of those factors. But there's lots of people have cashed in on those hotspots over time, but there's also lots of people who've lost out on them. I think it's trying to stick to the fundamentals and making sure you're doing research on something, whether it's an investment or whether it's a development.
I was going to ask, so with the region, it's obviously booming, and like one of the statistics we saw in the presentation earlier today was just the number of people who are moving here from different parts of the country.
Yeah.
So, like, what would you say is like attractive and appealing for this region? Like, why are people moving? Like, why is that happening in your opinion?
You're based in Sydney, so traffic's number one, or lack thereof. Look, I think affordability and lifestyle are the two things you always talk around in this region. That Sydney keeps going ahead, and it just, for people, it becomes more and more unaffordable. I lived in Sydney for a long time, and when we were at that point of wanting to really settle down and put our roots down, I returned here. I'm born and bred in Newcastle, but it was coming back here because we could buy a shoebox in Sydney when we were starting to plan a family, or we can come back and buy a family home on a decent block of land. And the lifestyle was the other attraction for us, and I think it's for most people, that you're 20 minutes from everywhere in Newcastle or Lake Macquarie, but most people sort of say that. It's probably sneaking out a little bit more than that, depending on where you're going and what the timing is. But I think the lifestyle that as I said before, we've got beautiful beaches. You can get a park here at Merriweather Beach, unlike Bondi Beach, where you're sort of walking 5 kilometres from where you park to get there in the peak of summer. So I think those beaches, the lifestyle of the lake's incredible as well. But affordability is probably one of the biggest drivers. You can swap if you're a teacher, you're getting paid exactly the same in Sydney versus living in Newcastle. If you're a nurse, you're getting paid exactly the same in Sydney as living in Newcastle or Lake Macquarie. So people look at it and go, well, we can move to somewhere that we can afford to buy a home rather than a one-bedroom apartment. We can move to somewhere where we're closer to work, so we're not having to spend an hour in the car each way at the end of a 12-hour shift if you're a nurse or a doctor. And the lifestyle's a little bit different. Sydney's an incredible place to live. There's a little bit more connectedness and community here because it's a little bit smaller. It's a very, very big country town in some ways.
Yeah, it's compelling.
Yeah.
And I think probably they're the factors that a lot of people look into.
Yeah.
Like when they're weighing up their options.
Yeah.
Like seeing how far they're going.
Yeah. It's huge. I think that the headlines all the time is about cost of living at the moment and affordability crisis when it comes to housing. And I think Newcastle, Lake Macquarie and Central Coast, I think probably has a lot of the same factors. It's still accessible to Sydney, but you can go down to Sydney for a weekend. You go to a Coldplay concert, Coldplay in Sydney next week. My wife and son are going down and they're going to stay the night. They'll get to see Coldplay and then come back here. So you're still accessible to all the huge things that Sydney has to offer and the major city has to offer, but you can live a little bit easier. There's not as much stress at the moment financially living in Newcastle, and it's a great place to grow up.
Yeah. Jason's considering moving. I don't really have a picture.
I don't know what to consider. It's a lady up his air. Sydney's an incredible place, and there's some incredible parts to it. But I think there's factors that for regional towns, it's not just Newcastle. There's lots of places. Wollongong's really accessible to Sydney still, and offers a lot of the same lifestyle things. That there's a big outflow of people from Sydney to the Southern Highlands during sort of the peaks of COVID. It's might be come back a little bit. I know Mudgee boomed as well, so there's so many incredible places we've got that are still accessible, and I think depending on the type of work you're in, there's that mobility of people to move around, and working from home obviously changed that for a lot of people who might have been office bound before as well.
Yeah, so would you say there's a lot of buyers around at the moment?
There definitely is. I think we've seen in the residential market there's a huge uptick in listings at the moment. So I think that spring's always a busy period from a listings point of view. But I think we're probably at a real peak at the moment for the last 3 years. But in that sort of peak of the COVID pandemic, there's more listings on the market than we've seen in the last couple of years. So it's always that supply and demand dynamic that you're trying to get to. As a selling agent, you want to get more demand than there is supply, because it's what puts upward pressure on pricing. There's definitely buyers out there. I think there's probably a lot of people still sitting back and waiting for the much talked about interest rate drops to come in, whether that's early next year, mid next year, and what it looks like. That it might be 0.25%. Does that really shift people's lending capacity? Does it really shift their ability to go and buy a property? So I think there's plenty of activity around at the moment. People are a little bit pickier because there is competition, or there's options out there for them. So they're going towards those ones that are finished, moving ready. Those ones that maybe need some work or need a renovation are probably sitting on the market a little bit longer. And those days on market are going out a little bit, and there's a correlation between days on market and vendor discounts that, as I said before, your own high. But those ones that stay on the market longer are invariably the ones where you start to see some price reductions until they get a point that meets the market expectation, then you get your sale.
Yeah, interesting. And when you say that people are specifically looking for something ready to go, like how ready to go? Is the expectation like walking into a spec home showroom, or is it just, does the water run in the kitchen? Like when you say ready to move in, like there's levels to that.
Look, I think there's always different buyers in the market. So there's always those people looking for renovators, or people who are going, we want to put our own stamp on things. But I think we're in an age of instant gratification. We all have these wonderful things in our pocket that are supercomputers now, our phones, that we can get everything at the drop of a hat, that we can order food, we can order a taxi and it pulls up in front of us straight away. And I think shows like The Block have maybe lifted some expectations of levels of finishes and understanding of what people are aiming for. People want master suites now. They don't just want a bedroom, they want the walk-in wardrobe, they want the ensuite attached to it, they want the parents' sitting room outside of it. So I think there's elevated expectations all the time. And it's again that balance between expectations and budget and finding that balance. But I think we're finding that properties are done, like renovated and done to a good degree, or new build properties are the ones that are getting those really premium prices and quick, short days on market and moving along. Those ones where people are going to go in and go, well, we need to give it a paint before we can really move in.
Interesting. So I thought The Block would tend to lead people the other way, would inspire people. I want to do a renovate. I want to be a renovator. I want to be involved in real estate myself. But it's interesting that your take is what that's doing is that's just raise the expectation of buyers.
There's definitely a cohort out there that they're wanting to front season The Block. There's a couple of young girls from Newcastle on there that I think they may be 20 or early 20s, and they've already done a couple of renovations and flips. So there's definitely a cohort of people who have been inspired by The Block and other shows like it to go in and want to do that. But I would say it's probably a fairly small cohort in the market. The bulk of the market are people who don't have the time, don't have the skills, or don't have the drive to go and do the amazing things that people are doing on The Block. It's a little bit of a fantasy as well, the way The Block's presented. It's made for TV, so it's not the reality of things. And I think there's lots of people who've tackled their first reno and want to touch another one, given how hard they can be. But there is definitely a cohort of people who want to do those sort of things, but I'd say the larger portion of the market are people who don't have the skill capacity or desire to do that. They want to walk in and buy some new furniture or put their current furniture in the house, and then away you go.
Okay. Yeah, that's really good to know. So I think that's going to affect the way we go with some of our projects. How much money do we put in the existing stock or some of the houses we've got? So we might make them up nice so someone look at it and it's just ready to just put furniture in the house.
And there's different tiers to markets and different brackets that you're operating in. And if you're in that sort of $750,000 to $800,000 price bracket, you can't expect to buy something that has all the fittings and finishes like The Block. And I think there's really smart ways to go about it. And your experience that both of you had, there's really smart choices you can make around your impact pieces within a home, the kitchen is a really big impact space. So doing your bench tops, and there's plenty of different options out there now in terms of quality of finish and size of bench tops. The 40mm bench tops used to probably be the standard, but I think by the time we're seeing 20mm bench tops, it's still it's a nice feeling bench top without having to double the size and double the cost of what your bench top achieves. There's some really great, moving away probably from the laminated floorboards, there's some manufactured products out there now that are really close to natural wood, or they're a combination of natural wood and a backing board that give you that exact same feel. So I think there's some really smart choices experienced developers and people doing renovations can make, that you can give that feel without having to spend the block type of money. That you can give people a taste of that at different levels.
Chop down an ancient tree and make a piano out of it or something like that. Whatever craziness they do. But for some of our stock, I was actually doing some of the selections last week, and there's some really incredible laminate flooring that come in panels that look like timber. And
it's changed. That I think the lino laminate of the sort of 90s and previous years, it doesn't feel nice. You don't want to walk around barefoot on it. Whereas the products they're coming out with, new technologies, they are manufactured products, but they come out looking really great and feeling really great, and people are really happy with them, and they give that luxury feel without having to.
To me, that's a lot of money on a reno, but I guess they're doing whole apartment blocks and houses and
and it's a TV show, and it's a game show in a lot of ways. That it's not reality, and they're doing things in all sorts of different places, and whether they stack up. And there's been some articles of late around properties that are sold on the block and a couple of years later selling at a loss. That once that sort of hype and sizzles worn away from the TV show, do they really stack up in the market? I think the depreciation schedule they've got on there are pretty impressive as well. I read an article lately of what they actually put into the places when you actually price it all up at the prices you and I pay for all things versus how much is getting donated by suppliers to the block because it's part of their advertising budget. So it's a fantastic show that inspires a lot of people and gives some brilliant ideas on things and design, but it's hard to implement sort of some of those things in reality sometimes.
What comes to mind to me is I can introduce, and I know a bunch of builders, and we probably know a bunch of builders. For $1 million, you can push a house over and build a real nice house. A whole new one, a whole new house.
And not have to work around the old structures, and you just go with a brand new one and you get everything you want. You structure them.
That's it from me.
That's it from you? Is there anything you want to tell the people?
No, just really appreciate what you guys are doing, and I think the more people are talking about development and educating people, I think it's fantastic. So I really appreciate what you guys are doing, and really appreciate you having me on and a chance to talk.
If people want to find you, where can they find you? How can they find you?
Social, so LinkedIn, I'm on a lot for sort of people in the development space, so Michael Edwards, Shields & Co Property, same on Facebook. My phone number's floating around like most real estate agents, so pretty easy to find from that point of view as well. So always happy to chat and help in any way I can, whether it's in the development space or whether it's in the residential real estate space as well.
Awesome.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for joining us on today's podcast. Very enlightening, some excellent insights from an excellent agent in the local area, and we'll catch you on the next episode.